Okay, welcome to part 5. I believe I left you with the story. I believe I left you with the Briar Hill boys telling me that Frito had $500,000 worth of pot planted on my property. And I had contacted Major Frazier from the Kentucky State Police Internal Affairs. I'm pretty sure that's where I left off. Anyway, one of my best friends in the whole world is named Scott. And we grew up together in northern Ohio from the time we were just little boys. And sometime about, 18 years ago, he had moved with his wife at that time to Knoxville, Tennessee. But we kept in touch over the years. There was rarely a month that went by when we didn't talk on the phone, and periodically we would visit one another. But he's one of my best friends, still to this day one of my best friends. Scott and I, we're talking about the situation. He said, you know what, he goes, and I told him, I said, things are getting kind of scary. I'm staying in this house. He said, look, he goes, I could come out for a few days. Knoxville from my property is only about an hour drive. He said, I'll come spend a couple of days and we'll hang out. And I'm like, well, that'll be nice to have somebody that I can trust. So Scott shows up, and we're sitting on my front porch, and we heard a car coming into the holler. And there's some trees that a car has to clear before you can see who the car is. The car was moving pretty good, and then it slowed down. And it slowed down to a crawl, and it was Super Trooper in his patrol car. And he's just crawling by my house. He's not looking up at the porch, or he's not looking at the house at all, but he's crawling just as slow. He couldn't went any slower without actually stopping. And then once he cleared my house, he gunned it. He took off. And my buddy Scott looks at me, he goes, you got to be shitting. And I'm like, no. I go, he does that 4 or 5 times a day. He goes, he's just trying to intimidate you. And I said, well, yeah, it's not working yet, but I could see how it might start. And he said, this can't go unanswered. Now, I've known Scott a long, long time, and Scott's kind of crazy. And I hesitated to ask, but I said, what do you have in mind? He said, look, he goes, we're going to have to go down, we're going to do some target practice. And Scott's a shooter, as am I, and he had brought his .45 with me. He goes, how many guns you got here? And I go, I got an arsenal here. He goes, let's pack up some guns, go down there as close to Frito's house as we can, set up some targets, and just start shooting. I said, all right, I'm with you. Scott had talked to me throughout the time we were teenagers, but I tell you what, I don't know how much trouble I got into because of him. But anyway, I'm like, yeah, sorry. And he was right. I couldn't let that stand. I mean, that's what Garland was trying to do. He was trying to intimidate me. So Scott and I, we load up our guns, we get on our four-wheelers, and we head up to holler. And if you look at some of my older videos, or some of my shooting videos, you will see that there's a spot that we shoot at. Well, what you can't see is that spot is only about maybe 30 yards away from Frito's front door. So we found a spot. There was a little clearing in the woods that was as close to Frito's house as we could get. We set up a target, and I'll bet you we blew through 700 or 800 rounds. He took his .45. I took my 40 cal Glock, my Smith & Wesson 357, my 12 gauge Remington, and my AK-47, and we blew through all the ammo we had. I mean, we just shot and shot and shot, and it echoes through the whole holler. But I mean, I can really imagine how loud it was in Frito's house. And when you consider how the short period of time from when Garland first pulled his little drive-by to the time we started target practicing, probably maybe 15 minutes, I think it did send a clear message. One, we were armed, and 2, we weren't easily intimidated. Unfortunately, though, Scott had a job in Knoxville, and he couldn't stay forever, but he stayed about 3 days, and then he went back to Knoxville. Interestingly enough, at that time, well, people have asked me, what about Pinhead, what about Pinhead? For those of you who joined on to this conversation from the first part of this series, there's a video once, right before that, it's titled Obama's Change or something like that. It mentions a guy named Pinhead. Well, Pinhead he's in this story. He's been around. Pinhead at this point is pretending to be my best friend. He's coming over and he's bringing booze with him, and he wants to hang out. He wants to go four-wheeling, wants to go hunting. He's really, I mean, he's becoming a fixture in my life. And it was kind of a weird scenario because he was overly nice to me, and I knew what he was trying to do was gather intel for Frito's clan. I mean, I knew this. And but I was okay with that because then I figured I could feed some disinformation and use him in kind of a dual row. Maybe use him as the dupe. But yeah, I mean, you know, Pinhead was coming around. I mean, literally. Oh, if there's anything I can do for you, those trash done. I hope you take the trash out of this holler. You know, blah 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 blah. You know, and I thought, well, maybe he was befriending me or trying to befriend me because, you know, it was possible that, you know, he did want Frito gone from the picture. But after talking to several other people that kind of knew what was going on, the word was that he sold most of his pot to Frito. And Frito was the big drug lord, but he was, you know, Pinhead was, for the most part, just a grower and a small-time dabbler in selling. But not on the level of Frito's clan. But it was kind of interesting that Pinhead would poke around every now and again, and well, every day almost he came over. And to be honest with you, a likable guy. Yeah, and I didn't want to make yet another enemy at that point, so I kind of went like, yeah, you want to go for a win? Go for a win. You know, so expect to hear much more about Pinhead's role, because Pinhead in the future becomes a much more interesting character in this craziness, this mad play. So anyway, a couple of days after Scott left, the guy from Frankfurt, Major Frazier, called me, and Major Frazier wanted to know if I was available for somebody from his office to come and interview me, and they needed a written statement. And I said, yeah, absolutely. I said, but do me a favor. I said, whatever you do, can you send somebody from Frankfurt, because I don't really trust the local law enforcement community. And he said, well, yeah, we wouldn't send anybody from local. We'd definitely send somebody from the Frankfurt office, which Frankfurt's a couple, I don't know, 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours away. And he said, what day's good with you? And I said, well, you know, any day's good with me. Just let me know. And I said, I'll make myself available. He said, well, the guy who's going to come interview will contact you. And I said, well, that's cool. Well, like a day later, this guy calls me. And this guy introduces himself to me over the phone as Sergeant Hightower. And he said, are you available tomorrow around 4 o'clock in the afternoon? I said, absolutely I am. And he said, well, I'll be there about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, well, how long does it take you to, is it going to take you to get here from Frankfurt? He said, I'm coming from London. And my heart just stopped. And I hung up the phone. London, Kentucky is where the office was that Super Trooper worked out of. Now, Super Trooper got to take his car home every night, but the main state police office was in London, Kentucky. So I knew at that point the guy that was coming to interview me was a co-worker of Super Troopers, of Charles Garland's, and I was a little worried, to say the least. I'm going to stop it here. I'm going duck hunting in the morning. I don't know how I'll feel tomorrow night. I probably won't get to make another one until, like, say, I don't know, Saturday night or maybe Sunday. But hopefully you're all enjoying this. If not, well, there are a million YouTube channels. Everybody take it easy.